Hello everyone, this is Gigi, the OG Gigi in fact, and this is the final word on identity. So if you have not checked out yet, my podcast series called The Alternative, there are 3 parts on identity. You should check those out first. And so this is kind of a wrap up to all that. Each one had a main point or a solution that I hope you could take away from. And the thing about identity is that if somebody can convince you to identify yourself in a certain way, then they will forever, and I mean forever, have power and control over you and your life, unless you take that power and control back and identify yourself by your characteristics rather than your demographics. So we see this all the time with terrorist, fascist, Christian, Republican, and all other types of terrorist groups, how in order to attain power and control, they focus solely on identity politics. I mean, that is what the Republicans are doing globally, not just here in the United States, as bad as it is here. I mean, globally, they are terrorizing people based upon their identities of either being trans or being gay or being black. These are the hot spots right now that they're entirely focusing on. And because of these tactics of focusing on an identity that a person cannot ever change or should change about themselves, but is still a demographic, a very small part of who they are as a person. It's just what they are. It's an unchangeable, insignificant part of your identity. And so because it's unchangeable, it's very easy to divide and conquer entire populations based on this. So that's why they're attacking trans people. I mean, crazily, what is a woman and all this, beyond sexist, misogynistic, misandrist comments, because it gets people to focus entirely on those insignificant parts of their identity. So instead of the conversation being, oh, this is a violation against human rights, what you're doing, Republicans, Christians, and fascists, what you're doing is a violation of human rights, it becomes, oh, well, that's just trans rights. So I'm not trans, and most people in the world aren't, so why should this concern me? It becomes a trans versus non-trans issue instead of a human rights issue, which is what it is, and which we could all identify with. And so this is why I stress in every single part of the alternative on identity is why you should never, ever, ever identify yourself by your demographics. Never identify yourself by your race and ethnicity, country of origin. Never identify yourself by your skin color, by your sex or gender identity, by your age. You should never identify yourself in any of these ways. Because, again, if you do, you become the pawn of these fascist, terrorist influencers and movements, and your life is forever destroyed. And it's very difficult to fight back to that, because it puts you in a situation where you're saying, well, if you try to identify yourself in a different way, like I can identify myself as a lover of music, all different types of music. It's like, but the terrorists would try to put it on a divisive identity. But aren't you black? I say, yeah, I am, but it doesn't matter. I love music. That's my identity. I say, no, but you're black, meaning everybody who's not black should be mad at you, or you should be mad at them for not being black and whatever. It's like, nope. Actually, I think, there are a lot of people in the world who love music the same way I do. Maybe different genres or whatever, but, it actually connects us. We all, regardless of what our skin color actually is, we all can name a type of music that we just love to listen to that, really hits us in our soul, in our spirit, or whatever you want to call it. And say, so you're against black? Nope, not saying that either. Nice try though, but yeah, I'm more than that. And that's what you have to do. You have to recognize their divisive tactics for what they are, because they will always try to bring it back to a demographic identity instead of a characteristic or deeper humanistic identity that you can have and should have and prioritize. So, in order to fight this very strong global fascist movement right now, and why I specifically started the alternative podcast about identity, is so that you recognize these tactics and immediately when it's being used, and have an immediate solution to counteract that, and thus gain more support and humanize you, so it completely destroys the us versus them narrative that they're trying to create. So like I said in the alternative part 1 on identity, demographic identities like skin color, age, sex, and what have you are things that have a lot of baggage on, a lot of history on, and there's no changing those identities either. So it's very easy to divide people along those lines. It's very easy to categorize and separate people along those lines, and it's easier to convince people that you are kind of less human or not worthy of being a friend or a partner or a member of a community because of those very insignificant and divisive demographics. And like I said in part 2 of the alternative podcast on identity, fascists, Christians, religious people, Republicans, all these other terrorist groups, they always focus on these demographic identities because it helps make them richer. They can easily start wars over this. Oh, well, you're not black enough, you're not white enough, you're not not one of us, you're one of them. And they've started wars for thousands of years and profiting off of the misery and the destruction of millions, if not billions, of human lives right now, because nobody fought against their identity manipulations and identity politics. They didn't recognize the alternative to that. And so whenever they purposely attack a group based on demographic identities, don't take the bait. As I said in part 2, you need to expand the identity to include everybody, because it really every single targeted attack, whether it's on Black communities, on immigrant communities, on young people, on old people for their Social Security or whatever, no matter what it is, don't make the cause a Black cause or a youth cause or a woman's cause. Don't take the bait. You have to make it an inclusive cause, which it is. It's a human rights cause. It's an American cause. It's a civil rights cause. And that way, you completely are immune to their identity politics and identity attacks, and garner far more support because more people can identify the cause with the cause now, because it's a human cause instead of just a Black cause or a woman's cause now. And just like I said in part 3, these terrorist organizations and influencers will always try to put everything on a plane they can understand. They understand only us versus them, Black and white mindsets. They can't understand facts or nuances or research, so they always fall back and give into their basic barbaric and savage, really, instincts. And that's why they always try to force the narrative back to a demographic identity instead of a characteristic or a humanistic identity. So, like I said in part 3 of the alternative identity, you need to, in that moment, recognize what is going on. Don't even call them out as racist or sexist, because that conversation will go nowhere. You need to stand up and put your identity on the spot as something else, anything else that is more humanistic or inclusive, or something that you love or are passionate about. In that moment, in the face of a bigot or a terrorist. So they'll say, well, no Blacks in my store. So I can say it again. What? You're against people who like Italian food? You like? Yeah, I do. It's one of my favorite foods. What? And it'll make them stop seeing you as a demographic identity and are actually able to connect with you on that. So change your identity in that moment to something that you love. Usually food and music work very well universally in any situation. And say, no gays in my store. I was like, oh, you're against Yankees fans? I love the Yankees. Why are you against Yankees fans? Don't you want? Why are you discriminating against Yankees? You are a fan of the Yankees? Yeah, I am. I didn't know. What do you think of their last game? And poof, the us versus them narrative destroyed. And look, you have a possible friend, or the entire situation of violence and bigotry is completely neutralized. And it really is that simple. But most people don't realize actually how simple it is to combat these fascist and terrorist and bigoted narratives. But you have to be aware of it. You have to be aware of these tactics, and you have to know and recognize the counterattacks that you can have in those moments. And that is why I focused my first part of the alternative on identity. So right now, I want you to think about what's going on with your life right now, not just the day-to-day and local, but also nationally, globally. What is going on? Are you making more or less money than you have been in the last couple of years? Are you happy? Are you happy at all? How's your mental health been? I mean, not just short term, but literally long term. Are you more worried about stuff now? Are you in a state of fear and worry all the time, whether you realize it or not? Instead of trying to cope with it, actually recognize why this could be happening. And it always falls back to the identity politics of the terrorists and fascists and people in power trying to put you in a constant state of fear and worry instead of a state of empowerment where you feel and recognize the fact that you can do something about it. You can literally end the global wealth and income inequality. Yes, you can. You can end that. But if you just try to cope with it or settle for it or try to deal with it, you're allowing this oppression to be normalized. And oppression, bigotry, fascism should never be normalized. Okay? And that has everything to do with identity. If you identify yourself by what you love, what you're passionate about, what inspires you as your primary source of your identity, you become immune to all those identity politics and attacks, and you actually become a lot more empowered, focused, and significantly happier too. And say, oh, well, this is how life is, and this is how history goes. Eventually things will change. And it's like, I actually want you to step back and realize things don't change on their own. There's always a catalyst, a cause, a fight that initiates it. Do you honestly think what happened in the 60s and civil rights movements or whatever, did you honestly think that was just going to, change, and that there would be more civil rights and unions and human rights and stuff without somebody actively making that change, without people coming together and actively fighting for that change? Do you honestly think that the change just would have happened anyway? Of course it wouldn't. And that's why fascism and Nazism and religiosity, God belief, nationalism, and all those diseases of humankind get power is when people don't actively start trying to make changes in their life. They just say, oh, it'll happen eventually. This is just history. This is whatever. Nothing I can do. Yes, you have to do something. And yes, you can do something. And once you prioritize your identity by who you are, your loves, your passions, what inspires you, what you're interested in, rather than what you are, divisive categories like race, skin pigment, country of origin, sex, age, class, etc., you gain all the power that you had lost previously back into your life. It comes back to you. You stop settling for normalcy or the status quo. You stop allowing normalization of terrorism and fascism and say, no, I deserve better. My family deserves better. My children, grandchildren, and people who will be around after I die deserve better. We all deserve better. Normalcy is bad. Status quo is bad. We should never strive to be normal or accept normal in any circumstance, regardless. Everything can get better, and we need to strive to make everything better. Make ourselves better, make our lives better, make humanity in general better, and make the world better. And we all can do this right now. But the first step is recognizing who you are, not allowing others to define you by demographic identities, and saying, nah, my identity, I love Japanese food. I love jazz and pop and hip-hop music. I love soul music. I am a huge fan of many different video games. I'm a huge fan of Boa Kwan. I'm a fan of opera. I'm a fan of blah, blah, blah. Whatever you need to do, make those your top identities so that when the bigots come with their intentionally divisive narratives, you can just squash it in that moment, saying, nope, this is me, and I won't let you define me by your weak and insignificant narratives. Because I'm more than that. I am me. I am human. And I'm freaking fabulous. So this is my final word on identity. And you can kind of see this in my original lyrics that I wrote to a song called Who I Am, which is also on my Patreon page and my YouTube page. So check that out. I have written original lyrics for a couple of songs, and the one I did for Who I Am is very meaningful for me, and I hope you understand the message of those lyrics as well. So thank you very much. Stay true to yourself. Stay true to who you are. Don't let the bigots and terrorists define you. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for your support and for listening.